Okay, think about this for a second. What if the solution to all that corporate bloat, the endless meetings and the jargon, wasn't to streamline things, but to just amputate them? Sounds pretty intense, right? Well, today we're diving into a really radical business philosophy that does exactly that. It's designed to slice through all that complexity like a surgeon's scalpel. It's called the Moral Essentialism Audit, and it might just change how you see everything. So let's start with a feeling, and I bet you know this feeling all too well. It's those back-to-back meetings, right? The completely meaningless jargon flying around, and that little sinking feeling in your gut that tells you most of your work is just busy work. This isn't just a bad week at the office. No, it's actually a trap, and it has a name, the complexity trap. So I'm going to ask you a direct question. Just be honest with yourself. Does your calendar look like a losing game of Tetris? I mean, just packed to the brim with meetings that go absolutely nowhere? And is your company drowning in this sea of buzzwords that feel like they're designed to hide what's really going on? If you're sitting there nodding your head right now, yeah, you are definitely not alone.
This whole problem actually has a name. It's called artificial complexity. It's what happens when all the processes, the roles, the corporate speak, it all gets so tangled up that it just stops serving any real purpose. Instead, the complexity itself becomes a kind of smokescreen. It's the perfect place for incompetence to hide, right? And it becomes this massive barrier that just chokes the life out of any real progress.
Okay, so if we're all stuck in this trap, how do we get out? Well, the answer isn't what you'd expect. It's not another new process. It's not adding another layer of management. Nope. The answer is something way more radical. It's something called a moral audit. Just look at this contrast here. The typical approach, what everyone usually does is try to manage the complexity. They try to streamline it. But this new solution, it's a flat-out rejection of all that. It basically says, forget managing, start judging. Don't streamline, amputate. And don't just add more structure on top of everything. No, find the absolute rock-bottom physics of your business. And all of this brings us to the formal name for this whole philosophy, the Moral Essentialism Audit. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about, cleaning house or spring cleaning your org chart. This is a deep, almost ethical investigation into what is truly essential for a business to even exist in the first place. And here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think a razor-sharp business concept like this came straight out of Silicon Valley, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Its roots are actually in 19th century Russia. No, I'm not kidding. So the whole idea kicks off over 100 years ago with, get this, the novelist Leo Tolstoy. He was the one who argued that radical simplification was the only path to finding moral truth. Now, let's fast forward to today. A business strategist named Albert Tan has basically taken that exact philosophy and weaponized it for the corporate world. He calls his version operational subtraction. So Tolstoy's whole thing was this. He believed that these huge, complex institutions like the state or the church were just artificial layers that were built up to hide the simple truth. And he argued that to find that truth, you had to strip everything away, get right down to the essential moral core. And believe it or not, that exact idea is the engine that drives this entire audit today. Okay, so that's the philosophy, the big idea. Pretty cool, right? But how does it actually work? Like, in the real world, how do you perform this amputation? Well, it all starts with a concept borrowed from engineering called the signal-to-noise ratio. And the key insight here is super important. To make something clearer, you don't just shout louder. That's just boosting the signal. The smarter way is to eliminate all the background noise so the signal can be heard clearly. So the big question is, what counts as noise in a company? The rule for this is, well, it's brutally simple but incredibly powerful. Here it is. If it does not directly touch the customer or the product, it is noise. That's it. A meeting, a process, a whole department, if it doesn't touch the customer or the product, it's noise, period. And that rule leads to a pretty ruthless 3-step method. Step 1, you identify the noise, using that simple rule we just talked about. Step 2, you amputate. You don't reevaluate it, you don't try to restructure it, you cut it off, completely remove it. And then, step 3, you observe. You just watch what happens. And if the system doesn't break, and that function wasn't just unnecessary, it was parasitic. It was literally feeding off the healthy parts of the company. And I really want to double down on the language here, because the words we use define the action we take. This is not about streamlining. That's such a weak corporate speak term, right? It implies these gentle little adjustments. This is about decisive surgical removal. We don't streamline, we amputate. And you have to understand, this isn't just a fancy way to talk about cutting costs or boosting efficiency numbers for the next quarter. Make no mistake, at its very core, this whole thing is a hunt for the fundamental truth of the business.
This quote from Albert Tan, it's basically the manifesto for this entire idea. It's a declaration of war on artificial complexity. It's all about slicing through that tangled mess we talked about and getting back to the absolute core, what he calls the physics of the company. Just the product and the truth. Anything else is just noise, and it has to go.
So this whole framework, it really leaves us with one big critical question to take back with us, to our own jobs, our own teams, our own companies. And it's this: what is the signal, and what in your world is the noise?